Hello, I'm Dr. Jim Coyle, and this tutorial from Social Work Practice with Individuals is going to discuss motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing is supported by a number of different theories. It's person-centered. It also explores cognitive dissonance or people's ambivalence about what they want. And more specifically, it's related to the trans-theoretical model of change. That model suggests that when people are experiencing some type of problem, we can look at their interest in changing that goes in a few stages. It starts in pre-contemplation, which means they're not really thinking about this at all yet. Contemplation means they've started thinking about whether this is a problem that they should do something about. Preparation is suggesting that although they may not be ready to do anything, they may be interested in seeing what they could do or seeing what may be effective. Action stage is that they're willing to take a look at this and see what they can and do something about it. Maintenance is they've already made some changes and they're interested in keeping that up, while relapse means that they weren't able to keep up those changes and the problem has reoccurred. So motivational interviewing is about identifying where in the process of change a person is. It's often used when treating substance abusers who are not sure whether they or do not admit whether they really have a problem or not. This model focuses on collaboration rather than on confrontation. So the first thing is, what do you know about motivational interviewing or the trans-theoretical model of change? What have you known from your past learning or from your observations of people or even from the current reading that was assigned for this course? What makes sense to you? What's uncertain? Write down your ideas and your questions, and we can address those in the in-class discussion about this model. When you use motivational interviewing to help clients, you try to assess and build the client's motivation. Recognizing that your idea of what the motivation should be may not be the client's idea. So you want to collaborate, particularly when the client does not acknowledge the need for change. You accept the client's perceptions as valid, even if you think what's going on is maintaining a problem. You go with what the client is willing to take a look at this point in time. And you then use the relationship that you have with the client to foster change over time. And that includes empathy and acceptance and working with the client instead of pushing the client. It acknowledges that change can occur quickly if something happens or the client decides that something is different in their life. So motivational interviewing identifies the client's stage of change, as I mentioned earlier. It lets the client decide what change will fit for them. And you accomplish that through engagement and collaborating with the client, and evoking, which is a way of saying open-ended questions. It's trying to get the client to provide information about how they're seeing and how they're perceiving it, rather than some of the other models, which tend to ask questions to get the client to see their problem in particular ways that is going to fit for that model. Questions also focus and summarize in order to help the client get a sense of where they are and what is going on for them. And that tends to enhance their motivation and help them to look at their situation in a way that feels good for them. Finally, it focuses on planning. What change will the client feel able to do? And often you are able to ask the client to rate the possible change. For example, if they rate the possibility of change at a 2 or a 3, then it may be that you talk with them about, well, what is it that you may feel stronger about? So it may not be so much focusing on what do you need to do to change at this particular change. It may be that there's another kind of stage of change which would fit better, and perhaps helping them kind of identifying that. Before we get into the role play, I meant to give you a couple examples. So let's go back to this. If you're working with a client that has a substance abuse problem, for example, if they are accepting that they have a substance abuse problem and they are at an action phase, then basically you use the methods that you would generally use because they're interested in change and you're helping them do that. On the other hand, if they're at a preparation stage, you may instead ask them to kind of log how often they are using that substance, what its impact is on them and the people around them, in order to get them to take a look at what is happening as a result of that. On the other hand, if they're in a contemplation stage, you may just ask them, well, think about what is happening when you're using this substance, and think about, is this a problem or is this not a problem? Because that matches where they are in terms of it. If they're at a pre-contemplation stage, you may say, well, it seems like other people may say this is a problem, but you haven't really considered it. Why don't you think about it? And then you can come back if you would like to get some help about it. And that puts the responsibility in the client's hands. Motivational interviewing can also be very helpful if you have a client who is either mandated by a court or a probation officer to come in for treatment, or an adolescent whose parents are saying that the adolescent needs counseling, because those are situations where where your client may say, it's the problem, I don't have the problem, somebody else has the problem. And that gives you the option of saying, okay, and rather than arguing with them that, yes, you do have a problem, which doesn't help you collaborate with them, you can say, well, if that other person has a problem, are they making your life difficult? Usually that is the case. You can say, so what would help you get your parents off your back? Or what would help you do what your probation officer, what the court wants you to do, so that they'll get off your back, so that they won't bother you anymore. And that gets them to kind of reframe the way they are thinking about treatment. And you're working with helping them kind of acknowledge what is it that they need to do. Okay, and this particular case example, which is at the link there, and I'll put the link in the comments for this video. This is about Nathan, and he is talking with the counselor about a problem with drinking and cocaine. And so I want you to take a look at how the counselor, how the worker is kind of working with him. So notice how the worker is engaging, how the worker is focusing the issues for him, how the interviewer evokes change language and helps the client plan what makes sense for them to work on. Notice the collaboration. Notice how the interviewer is trying to enhance Nathan's motivation. Consider, how effective do you think this was? And recognize that the textbook has a very interesting example of this in the section called School Brawler, where Bettina is having some difficulties at school, but she sees it as responding to other people. And okay, how do you work with her? The benefits of motivational interviewing are it's collaborative rather than confrontational, and that can help feel more positive and mean that you are, being able to meet the client where they are. It's an alternative for clients who are unsure about change. Instead of just saying, well, you have to change, or, well, then what are you doing here? It's an alternative. It's something in the middle that you can work with them. And it may fit well with other treatment models, because although motivational interviewing may help you identify a goal, you may use interventions from other models to accomplish the goal that the client agrees to work on. Critiques of motivational interviewing have focused on have said that it's a narrow focus, and it can ignore important aspects of client functioning from some people's views, their intelligence, their judgment ability, psychological aspects that are influencing why this is a problem and why they may not may want to avoid seeing it as a problem. There's also some possible social justice issues that could be influencing here about whether the client is really able to do anything about this themselves. When the client is ready for change, motivational interviewing doesn't tend to add anything to it. You identify that they're ready for change and you immediately then say, okay, fine. Well, then what models seem to fit with that? Because the motivational interviewing is focused on, do we need to be addressing something different than just changing the presenting problem? So consider, what did you learn from the assigned reading, from this tutorial, from watching the video, from your own experiences with clients? It helps if you jot down any questions, any ideas, any experiences that you've had, because we can talk about this in the in-class discussion, and they can also help you when we do a role play about this particular model in class. So we'll wait and see what happens in class now.